Claire Donovan had never imagined Christmas night would end with her gripping the edge of the hospital bed, gasping for breath while the heart monitor beeped like a warning she could no longer ignore. 8 months pregnant, terrified, and completely alone, she stared at the ceiling lights that blurred above her because the man who vowed to protect her was somewhere in Beverly Hills with another woman, drinking champagne and pretending he didn't have a wife waiting for him in New York. By the time Claire was discharged, the snow outside had stopped. Manhattan felt painfully quiet, the kind of silence that makes every truth louder. She walked into the Upper East Side apartment, his apartment, really still smelling faintly of cedarwood cologne Nathan always used. But that scent no longer felt like home. It felt like a stranger's shadow stretching across her life. She wiped her palms on her coat, steadied herself, then crossed the living room. The glow from the Christmas tree flickered weakly, like it knew the celebration had died hours ago. Claire reached up to her ears and removed the diamond earrings Nathan had given her 3 years ago. The earrings, he said, would make her look less ordinary. She placed one earring gently on the marble coffee table. The other she kept clenched in her fist, so tight the metal cut into her palm. Beside the lonely earring, she left the letter. A short goodbye. No begging, no accusations, no dramatic confessions, just the truth he always refused to face. When Nathan finally returned from his luxury escape with Sienna Marlowe, he stepped into the dark apartment expecting a guilty thrill, maybe even excitement. Instead, he noticed the eerie stillness first, then the glowing Christmas lights, then the single diamond earring catching the dim light like a frozen tear. His stomach dropped. The letter lay beside it. He recognized Claire's handwriting instantly. The world tilted. He swallowed hard, hands shaking, and reached for the envelope. But before he could open it, something on the floor made his heart stop cold. A hospital wristband, with Claire's name on it, and the date, Christmas Eve. He staggered back, pulse pounding, dread crawling up his spine as he realized this wasn't a simple goodbye. It was something far worse. He wasn't ready for what the letter said. Claire Donovan hadn't always lived in a world of marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, and silent hallways that echoed every insecurity she carried. Before Nathan Donovan swept her into his polished Manhattan life, she had been a music teacher in a modest Brooklyn elementary school. Someone who believed that small joys could still change a day, that kindness mattered, that love was supposed to be gentle. And maybe that was why she fell for Nathan so quickly. They met 5 years earlier at a fundraiser her school partnered with, hosted inside a glass-walled conference hall overlooking the East River. Claire had been helping her students tune their instruments when a man in a tailored navy suit approached, holding a spilled cup of coffee like evidence of a crime. He laughed awkwardly, admitted he was terrible at social events, and somehow made Claire laugh harder than she had in months. Nathan was brilliant, ambitious, magnetic in a way that felt safe back then. He listened when she spoke about music therapy, admired her dedication to teaching, and said he envied people who lived real lives instead of corporate spreadsheets. He made her feel seen. But the biggest reason Claire loved him was simpler. He made room for her dreams, or at least he said he would. When he asked her to marry him, she believed every word. The first year of marriage was slow mornings with cheap coffee, piano chords drifting from the living room, Nathan kissing her forehead before leaving for work in his wrinkled dress shirt. They lived in a cozy one-bedroom in Brooklyn with mismatched furniture and neighbors who argued loudly about football. It wasn't glamorous, but it was theirs, and Claire felt like the luckiest woman alive. But success changes people not always overnight, but inch by inch. When Nathan was promoted to Director of Strategic Development, everything shifted. Suddenly, they were visiting luxury condos, talking about investment portfolios, attending events where Claire always felt underdressed. Nathan upgraded his wardrobe, his friends, his expectations, and eventually his attitude toward her. "You're too soft for Manhattan," he said once, not joking. "You don't push hard enough." Claire laughed it off, thinking he was stressed. But the comments continued, small cuts, easy to dismiss individually, but together they bruised her confidence. She stopped playing piano as often, stopped talking about the music program she wanted to build, stopped believing she had a place in Nathan's glittering new world. When she got pregnant after years of trying and one heartbreaking miscarriage, Claire hoped it would bring them closer. She imagined quiet nights decorating a nursery, Nathan talking to her belly, the two of them rediscovering the simple version of love they once shared. But Nathan only grew busier, more distracted, always glancing at his iPhone, always claiming another meeting, another dinner, another unexpected business trip. Claire convinced herself it was temporary. That pregnancy made her emotional, that after the baby arrived, everything would settle. But deep down, she already knew she was alone. Still, she stayed gentle, she stayed loyal, she stayed hopeful. Because loving Nathan had become a habit, one she couldn't undo overnight. And because the tiny heartbeat inside her was the only miracle she trusted. But on Christmas Eve, in that cold hospital room where she lay trembling without Nathan's hand in hers, something inside Claire shifted forever. For the first time, she understood the truth Nathan spent years hiding behind charm and ambition. She had married a man who loved what she made him look like, not who she was. And that realization would change everything. The Upper East Side apartment looked like a magazine spread. Sleek marble floors, chrome fixtures, curated artwork. Nathan claimed he got a deal on, even though everyone knew nothing on Park Avenue came cheaply. To outsiders, it was the dream. A 12th-floor unit with sweeping views of the East River, a kitchen lined with stainless steel appliances, and a living room that glowed gold each morning as sunlight bounced off neighboring high-rises. But to Claire, it had always felt like a beautiful cage. When Nathan first brought her here, she tried to see the place through his proud, ambitious eyes. He wrapped an arm around her waist, pressed a kiss to her cheek, and whispered, "This is our new life." But the walls echoed differently for her. The rooms felt too large, too polished, too quiet, an expensive silence that swallowed her voice. Back in Brooklyn, life had been messy but alive. Kids laughed in the hallways, music filled her classroom, neighbors waved from fire escapes. Here, everything felt distant. Even the air seemed thinner, as if the building belonged more to Nathan's rising status than to the two of them. Claire tried to adapt. She decorated the nursery corner with pastel colors, placed her old keyboard near the window, bought soft blankets and lullaby books. But Nathan kept shifting the furniture, removing clutter and discouraging anything that didn't match his minimalist, cold aesthetic. One afternoon, she found her keyboard unplugged and pushed behind the sofa. "I just don't think it fits the space," Nathan had said casually, scrolling on his iPhone. The space. Not their home. His space. Still, Claire made small rituals to ground herself, brewing tea at sunrise, reading on her Kindle, humming lullabies while folding baby clothes. She tried to make this apartment a place where her child could feel safe, even if she didn't. Then December arrived, and with it, the loneliness thickened. The city outside transformed beautifully. Fifth Avenue windows shimmering with ornaments, the Rockefeller tree lighting crowds below, couples sipping hot chocolate near Central Park. But inside the apartment, cold drafts of emotional distance ran deeper than winter winds. Nathan spent nights at networking dinners, returning home with the scent of expensive perfume that wasn't hers. He started locking his phone. He changed his passwords. Claire didn't confront him, not because she didn't know, but because she feared the truth might break her completely. And then came the night she fainted. She'd been standing near the Christmas tree, adjusting the small silver star at the top, when her vision blurred. The doctor had warned her about stress, warned her about overexertion, warned her that her pregnancy was considered high risk after the previous loss. But she'd been alone for hours, feeling the familiar ache behind her ribs, the shortness of breath that came with emotional strain. She collapsed silently onto the soft rug, lights blinking above her like distant stars. When she woke in the hospital, the city felt impossibly far away. And when she returned home, step by step up the hallway, the apartment that had once intimidated her now angered her. All the marble, all the glass, all the carefully staged luxury, it suddenly felt like evidence of a life she had never truly been part of. It wasn't home. It wasn't safety. It wasn't love. It was a monument to Nathan's ambition, built on her sacrifices. And she finally understood she didn't belong there. Not anymore. Nathan Donovan had perfected the kind of charm that fooled almost everyone. At first glance, he was the kind of man New York admired. Sharp suits, sharper ambition, a confident stride through glass buildings on Park Avenue. He spoke with just enough humility to seem grounded and just enough arrogance to be considered successful. People didn't question him, they envied him. But Claire had learned far too late that charm can be a mask. And Nathan wore his like armor. Long before the affair, there were signs. Small, subtle shifts she noticed but excused because she loved him. He began to correct the way she spoke at dinner parties, telling her to sound more polished. He criticized her clothes for being too soft, her music for being too sentimental, her dreams for being impractical. Claire thought he was stressed. Nathan knew exactly what he was doing. There was a darkness beneath his ambition, not violence, not cruelty in the obvious sense, but a quiet, strategic selfishness. Nathan was the kind of man who didn't explode. He calculated. He didn't argue. He dismissed. He didn't lie impulsively. He lied with purpose. And the biggest manipulation of all was convincing Claire that everything wrong in their marriage was her fault. When he met Sienna Marlowe at a Fifth Avenue charity gala, the world Nathan wanted, the world of social elites, luxury marketing teams, and glamorous rooftop parties opened like a golden door. Sienna wasn't just beautiful. She was the embodiment of the life he craved. She fit effortlessly into the high-end settings where he felt insecure beside Claire's softness. Sienna had an edge, the kind of woman who smelled of designer perfume and ambition, the kind of woman who knew exactly how to weaponize a smile. Nathan fell fast. Not because it was love, but because it fed the part of him that always felt not enough. With Claire pregnant, vulnerable, and quiet, Sienna's glittering world became intoxicating. She took him to private fashion previews, whispered praise into his ear, made him feel powerful. She told him he was meant for more. He liked the sound of that. So when Sienna suggested a Christmas business trip to Los Angeles, Nathan didn't hesitate. He lied to Claire without blinking. He left her alone without thinking. He shut off his phone notifications because he didn't want guilt ruining his weekend in Beverly Hills. And Sienna didn't just encourage the distance, she orchestrated it. She knew Claire existed, she just didn't care, because to Sienna, Claire wasn't competition, she was an obstacle. And obstacles were meant to be removed. Nathan let her. He allowed another woman to rewrite the narrative of his marriage. He let Sienna feed him doubts, telling him Claire was fragile, unambitious, emotionally draining. Nathan absorbed every word, transforming them into excuses for his betrayal. And on Christmas Eve, while Claire lay collapsed on the rug of their apartment, Nathan was in a penthouse suite, laughing over champagne, telling Sienna he needed clarity in his life. Clarity. That was the word he used, instead of betrayal. The truth was simpler. Nathan had outgrown the version of himself that Claire loved and had no intention of becoming a better one. But the one twist he never expected was this. Sienna didn't love him either. She was using him for access, status, and headlines. He just hadn't discovered that yet. And when he finally did, the fall would be catastrophic. Nathan Donovan wasn't born cruel. That was the part that made everything harder to understand and far more dangerous. He grew up in a cramped house in Ohio, the son of a mechanic and a waitress, constantly reminded that life wasn't built for people like him. He promised himself he would escape, that one day he would walk through glass doors on Park Avenue and no one would guess the truth about where he came from. And in many ways, he did escape. He built a career through grit and sleepless nights, clawing his way into rooms filled with polished shoes and Mont Blanc pens. But success didn't fill the hole he carried. It only fed it. Every achievement made him hungrier. Every compliment made him crave more. And every sign of vulnerability in the people who loved him became something he resented. Claire's softness, once the sanctuary he returned to after long days, slowly became the mirror he hated facing. She reminded him of where he came from, of who he really was behind the expensive haircut and perfectly tailored suits. And Nathan could not stand feeling small, especially next to a wife who wore tenderness like armor. He wanted a life that sparkled, a life that impressed the people who once ignored him. A life Claire wasn't built for. Enter Sienna Marlowe. She floated into his world at a corporate gala like she had stepped out of a luxury billboard, sleek black dress, hair pulled into a perfect knot, eyes that assessed everyone in the room as if she already owned it. She didn't flirt with Nathan at first. She measured him, calculated him. She saw the hunger in him, the insecurity beneath the polished exterior, and she smiled as if she already knew how to use it. Nathan fell fast not because of love, but because Sienna represented the version of himself he wanted to become. When she whispered, "You're the only real man in this room," his ego surged. When she told him he deserved a woman who understood power, he believed her. And when she suggested he deserved a Christmas getaway, worthy of a man like him, he didn't even hesitate. Sienna played him expertly. She fed him curated admiration in exchange for access to his corporate connections, his rising status, the invitations she couldn't reach alone. She learned everything about him, including the parts he tried to hide. His shame about his childhood, his fear of failure, his resentment toward Claire's simplicity. Nathan mistook manipulation for passion. The affair wasn't a mistake. It was a choice he made repeatedly, with full clarity, fueled by the belief that Claire would always be waiting at home, pregnant, forgiving, loyal. But the darkest part of Nathan wasn't the cheating. It was the justification. He convinced himself Claire was emotionally demanding. He told himself she didn't support his career, even though she had sacrificed hers for his. He claimed he needed space to think, which really meant he wanted freedom without consequences. Underneath everything, Nathan feared one thing more than losing Claire: being seen as ordinary. So he hid. Behind lies, behind long business trips, behind locked phone screens and excuses about stress. What he didn't know was that Sienna wasn't loyal to him either. She had already recorded private moments in their hotel suite. She had already told friends she planned to push Claire out of the picture. And she had already set her eyes on someone far more powerful than Nathan. Nathan believed he was in control. But he was just another piece on Sienna's board. And when Claire left that diamond earring on the table, it was the first move in a game Nathan never realized he'd already lost. Claire had always known that some wounds happen quietly, in private, behind closed doors. But the one that broke her, the betrayal that changed everything, didn't stay hidden. It unfolded in the harsh, unforgiving light of public spaces, where humiliation echoes louder than heartbreak. It began a week before Christmas. Nathan came home late, smelling faintly of Sienna's floral perfume, the one Claire had learned to recognize even before she saw the bottle on Fifth Avenue displays. He mumbled excuses as always: work, dinner, client drinks, networking. Claire wanted to believe him, but her instincts, sharpened by months of loneliness, whispered the truth she wasn't ready to face. The real blow came when a coworker of Nathan accidentally sent Claire a short text meant for someone else. "Did you see Nathan at the Midtown Lounge last night? Wild that he's not hiding it anymore." Claire stared at the message until the words blurred. She typed back, hands trembling, asking what he meant, but the coworker never replied. The silence was answer enough. Still, Claire told herself not to jump to conclusions. Pregnancy made emotions unpredictable. Stress distorted reality. At least, that's what Nathan had been telling her for months. But then came the moment that stripped her of every illusion. She had forced herself to attend a prenatal appointment alone earlier that day, enduring a doctor's reminder that her blood pressure was dangerously unstable. On the way home, she decided to stop by a small holiday market near Rockefeller Center to buy a handmade ornament for the baby, something symbolic, something hopeful. That's when she saw them. Nathan and Sienna. Not tucked away in a dark corner, but bold as daylight, walking side by side through the crowd. Sienna's arm brushed Nathan's, his head tilted toward her in a way he hadn't done with Claire in months. They paused near a vendor selling hot chocolate. Sienna laughed, touching his sleeve, and Nathan leaned in as though her joy was the only warmth he needed. And the worst part? People noticed. Two teenage girls whispered, "Isn't he married?" A man nearby said, "Guess money changes things." Someone lifted a phone as if capturing proof. Claire froze. Her breath caught. Her body turned cold from the inside out. She clutched her scarf, trying to steady herself, but her vision pulsed. The humiliation wasn't just emotional, it was physical, crushing, suffocating. Nathan didn't even look around. He didn't sense her there. He didn't feel the weight of what he had done. He just kept walking with Sienna, as if the life he'd built with Claire no longer existed. Claire backed away into the crowd, bumping into strangers who didn't know her world was collapsing. Tears blurred the holiday lights into streaks of white and gold. Someone asked if she was okay. She nodded, even though nothing was okay. Not her marriage, not her heart, not her baby's safety. The stress triggered a stabbing pain across her lower abdomen. She gripped a street lamp to stay upright, breathing shallowly, praying the pain would pass. A vendor hurried over, offering her a chair, but Claire shook her head. She didn't want kindness from strangers, she wanted her husband, the man who used to hold her through these moments. But that man was gone. Later that night, she confronted Nathan gently, asking if he'd been near Rockefeller Center. He denied everything, claimed she was imagining things, called her overly emotional, said pregnancy made women dramatic. The gaslighting hurt even more than the betrayal. It was in that moment, standing alone in the dim apartment, his cold voice echoing, that Claire realized something devastating. Nathan wasn't sorry. He wasn't conflicted. He wasn't even hiding it anymore. He had already chosen who he wanted to be. And it wasn't her husband. Claire had always believed she could endure anything if she stayed calm, breathed deeply, and reminded herself her baby needed her. But after the Rockefeller betrayal and Nathan's cold denial, something inside her began to fracture. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was a quiet unraveling, thread by thread, pulling at the pieces that had held her together for months. In the days leading up to Christmas, the apartment felt different, heavier, darker, as if the walls themselves were echoing every lie Nathan had told. Claire found herself standing in the middle of the living room at odd hours, hand on her stomach, trying to steady a heartbeat that no longer followed any rhythm she recognized. She should have called someone. She should have reached out. But isolation had become her routine, and shame made her silent. Her nights were the worst. She lay awake on the edge of their king-size bed, listening to Nathan's footsteps as he prepared for another work dinner. He didn't bother lowering his voice anymore when he spoke to Sienna. He didn't hide the tone he used, warm, excited, alive in a way Claire hadn't heard in years. Each muffled conversation was another pin pushed deeper into her chest. One evening, after he left, Claire finally allowed herself to cry, not the quiet tears she'd been holding back, but the kind of sob that makes the whole body tremble. She curled on the cold bathroom floor because she didn't want to stain the pillows they'd once shared with his betrayal. Her reflection in the mirror frightened her. Pale skin, dark circles, swollen eyes, a woman disappearing into her own grief. She whispered to her baby, "I'm trying. I'm really trying," and the words cracked as they left her lips. The next morning, exhaustion hit her like a wave. She walked into the kitchen, poured water into a glass, and realized she hadn't eaten properly in 2 days. When she reached for the counter to steady herself, her hand slipped. Pain shot up her arm as she braced the fall. Her heartbeat quickened, irregular and sharp. The room spun. She knew the signs her doctor had warned her, that stress could trigger complications. Still, she forced herself upright. She didn't want Nathan to come home and see her like this. She didn't want to give him another excuse to call her unstable. But the collapse was coming. That evening, when snow began drifting outside the window, Claire tried to set up the baby's bassinet. She wanted to feel hopeful again. She wanted one thing in that apartment that felt like it belonged to her and her child, not to Nathan's hollow, curated life. But the moment she lifted the small mattress, a sharp cramp ripped through her abdomen. She gasped, grabbing the edge of the crib. Another pain followed, harder, deeper. Her breath shortened. Panic rose. She fumbled for her phone, dialing Nathan, first instinct, not logic. It rang twice. Then he declined the call. Declined? Claire stared at the screen through blurring eyes. She tried again. Straight to voicemail. Again, nothing. Her body trembled. Her knees buckled. She slid to the floor, clutching her stomach, praying she wouldn't lose this baby too. The apartment lights flickered as if mocking her. Another contraction-like pain shot through her lower back, and she cried out. Finally, she crawled to her purse, hands shaking, and dialed the only other number she could think of, Dr. Warren Blake. Claire? Claire, talk to me. What's happening? His voice was steady, urgent. I can't breathe. Something's wrong. Within minutes, paramedics were at her door. As they lifted her onto the stretcher, Claire's gaze drifted to the Christmas tree. The ornaments glimmered softly, a cruel reminder of the life she thought she'd have. And as the elevator doors closed, she realized this wasn't a breakdown. It was the moment she officially stopped being Nathan's wife and started being a woman fighting for her own survival. While Claire was being rushed through the hospital corridors, wrapped in fear and fluorescent lighting, Nathan was sipping champagne in a Beverly Hills suite he had no business being in. The contrast could not have been harsher, nor the betrayal more complete. The hotel room itself looked like a postcard of luxury. Velvet drapes, a balcony overlooking palm trees wrapped in golden holiday lights, and a marble bar stocked with top-shelf liquor. Sienna had chosen the suite intentionally. Everything about it whispered temptation and power. Nathan, eager to feel like someone important, stepped right into the illusion. Sienna lounged across the bed in a silk robe, her long legs crossed, a glass of rosé balanced between her fingers. She watched Nathan unpack his suitcase, a small smirk playing at her lips, not affectionate, not tender, but possessive, as though she were evaluating a purchase she hadn't fully decided on. "You finally turned your phone off," she said. "I don't want any distractions," Nathan replied weakly, but there was a flicker of guilt in his eyes. "Your wife?" Sienna teased. "Or your conscience?" Nathan forced a laugh, but it didn't quite land. Still, he let her take his phone from his hand and place it face down on the bar. Out of sight. Out of thought. Out of responsibility. When Sienna kissed him, he let himself be swallowed by her perfume, sharp, floral, intoxicating. He sank into a version of himself he preferred. The man who climbed the corporate ladder, who booked luxury suites, who walked beside a woman admired by everyone at rooftop parties. He didn't think of Claire's soft voice or the way she held her belly when she laughed. He didn't think of the appointments he'd missed or the promises he'd broken. But guilt has a way of slipping under locked doors. Hours later, while Sienna curled against him, scrolling through fashion news, Nathan's mind drifted. Claire should have texted him by now. She always did. She reminded him to eat, to hydrate, to breathe, even when he didn't deserve it. He reached for his phone. Sienna grabbed his wrist playfully. "Don't ruin tonight." "It might be important," he said. "It never is," she replied, kissing him again. And like always, Nathan chose the version of reality that made him feel good over the one that made him accountable. Meanwhile, 3 time zones away, Claire was clutching the side of her hospital bed as monitors beeped frantically. Nurses pressed cool hands against her shoulders. A doctor urged her to breathe. Stress, blood pressure spike, risk to the baby. But Claire could barely hear them. She was drowning in the knowledge that Nathan, her husband, wasn't answering because he didn't want to. The universe, however, has an unforgiving sense of timing. At nearly the exact moment Claire cried out in pain, Nathan's phone buzzed where it lay on the bar counter. A single notification lit the screen. Emergency contact alert. Patient, Claire Donovan. Status. High priority. But Sienna was faster. She slid the phone into her purse without looking at the message. "You don't need that tonight," she murmured. And Nathan, too weak to insist, let her. Hours later, they strolled hand in hand to the hotel's rooftop lounge, laughing beneath twinkling lights while a DJ mixed holiday music. Nathan felt light, untethered, as if he had finally stepped into the life he believed he deserved. He didn't see the discarded hospital bracelet on Claire's wrist. He didn't hear her whisper his name through tears. He didn't know he had missed the moment she needed him most. He wouldn't know until he returned home. And by then, Claire would already be gone. Nathan arrived back in New York just after sunrise on December 26th, rolling his suitcase into the apartment with the kind of careless ease only a man with no conscience could muster. The city outside was waking slowly, pale winter lights spilling across the buildings, taxis humming below, the distant buzz of Manhattan returning from the holidays. Inside the apartment, however, something felt wrong the moment he stepped in. The air was too still, too clean, too quiet. He dropped his keys onto the console table and shrugged off his coat, expecting Claire to appear from the hallway, tired but forgiving, ready to accept whatever lie he offered. She always had, she always would. At least, that's what Nathan believed. He walked farther inside, calling her name once, then again with a hint of irritation. "Claire? Seriously? Are we doing this silent treatment thing now?" But there was no reply. The Christmas tree lights were still blinking softly, but several ornaments were missing from the branches. A blanket she often used on the couch was gone. The small rocking chair she'd picked out for the baby was no longer in its corner. Nathan's chest tightened as he scanned the apartment. A strange pressure formed in his gut, not guilt, not grief, but fear. The fear of losing control. Then he saw it. On the marble coffee table sat a small velvet box Cartier. His pulse quickened. He recognized it immediately. It was where he'd placed the diamond earrings after their first anniversary dinner. Claire had treasured them more than anything he'd ever given her. But now the lid was open. Inside was only one earring. Just one. Its twin was missing, a symbolic fracture that struck Nathan with a force he didn't understand yet. Beside the box lay an envelope, his name written in Claire's elegant handwriting. He reached for it, but something else caught his eye first. A hospital wristband on the floor near the sofa. Claire's name. Christmas Eve. Emergency department. The room tilted. Nathan stumbled back a step, dropping the envelope. He picked up the wristband with shaking fingers, reading the details again and again. His brain refused to process the truth. Claire had been in the hospital. On Christmas Eve. Alone, while he was in a luxury suite with another woman. For a moment, just a moment, something human flickered inside him. A crack in the armor, a flash of shame, a whisper of what he should have been. But the moment passed quickly, replaced by a rising panic. If Claire had been in the hospital, where was she now? Who had taken her? Who knew what had happened? And more importantly, what would this do to his reputation if anyone found out? Finally, with numb hands, he opened the letter. Claire's words were calm. Too calm. She didn't accuse. She didn't beg. She didn't argue. She simply told the truth. She had seen him with Sienna. She had understood the kind of man he had chosen to become. She had collapsed from stress the same night he silenced his phone. Their baby's health had been jeopardized, and she could no longer stay in a home built on humiliation. The last line struck him like a blade. I will not raise our child in a place where I am invisible. And die. Nathan read the sentence 3 times. Numbness spreading through his limbs like ice. She was gone. Really gone. And for the first time since he began lying, he felt something he couldn't manipulate, charm, or bury. Fear of losing everything. As he stood there, clutching the letter, a cold reality settled over him. This wasn't just Claire walking out. This was the beginning of consequences. And Nathan Donovan had never been built to survive consequences. Claire didn't leave the apartment in a rush. She left in the quiet, deliberate way of someone who had finally reached the edge of what her heart could endure. No slamming doors. No dramatic confrontation. No tears left to spill. Only a slow, painful clarity guiding every movement she made that morning. The doctor had told her she needed rest, calm, and safety. Nathan's home offered none of those things anymore. So she sat at the edge of the bed alone, exhausted, still wearing the hospital bracelet, and made a choice she never imagined making. She would save herself and her baby, even if it meant walking away from the life she had fought so hard to protect. She moved through the apartment methodically, gathering only what she needed. Not clothes or jewelry, those felt meaningless now. She packed the baby's ultrasound photos, a soft blanket her mother had knitted years before, her prenatal vitamins, her documents, and her Kindle tucked between them like a quiet reminder that she still had a mind, a voice, a future. When she opened the closet, her eyes swept over the rows of dresses Nathan wanted her to wear. Structured, expensive, uncomfortable. She didn't take a single one. Instead, she grabbed the oversized sweater she had owned long before Nathan ever entered her life. It smelled like home. It smelled like her. Next, she walked to the nursery corner. Nathan always referred to as the space, not the baby's room, not our child's future, just another section of his curated, spotless world. Claire touched the small wooden rattle she had bought at a street fair, the first thing she'd purchased after learning she was pregnant. It was simple, handmade, imperfect. Everything Nathan hated. She slipped it into her bag. Her hands trembled when she unplugged the lamp shaped like a moon. She had bought it after losing their first pregnancy, promising herself the next baby would sleep under a soft glow, never in darkness. She kept that too. But the moment she took the small rocking chair's cushion, the one she planned to sit on while reading bedtime stories, her knees weakened. She sank onto the floor, hand on her stomach, whispering, "We're leaving. I promise you, we're leaving." There was no turning back. Outside the apartment, the hallway felt colder than usual. The city hummed below, indifferent to the quiet heartbreak unfolding 12 floors above it. Claire pressed the elevator button, praying she wouldn't run into a neighbor who might ask about Nathan, or about Christmas, or about anything that would shatter her fragile composure. The elevator dinged. Empty. Thank God. She stepped inside, staring at her reflection in the metal walls. Pale skin, swollen eyes. But beneath the exhaustion, something new flickered, resolve. A faint, trembling beginning of strength. When the doors opened into the lobby, the doorman looked up in surprise. "Mrs. Donovan, you're heading out early today." It took everything inside her not to crumble at the title she would soon no longer wear. "Just stepping out for a while," she managed, forcing a small smile. He nodded politely, unaware he was witnessing her escape. Outside, the winter wind sliced across her cheeks, but it felt cleansing, real. She tightened her scarf and stepped onto the sidewalk, where countless strangers rushed by, each carrying their own secrets, their own struggles. Claire was just one among them, now another woman trying to start over. At the corner, a familiar gray Toyota pulled up. Marcia, her neighbor and unexpected ally, leaned across the passenger seat. "Get in, sweetheart," Marcia said gently. "You don't need to explain a thing." Claire exhaled shakily, the first breath that didn't hurt in weeks, and opened the door. As the car pulled away, she looked up at the apartment windows, cold, distant, shrinking behind her. She wasn't running. She wasn't hiding. She was leaving a life built on lies, and stepping toward the first truth she'd chosen for herself in a very long time. Claire didn't write the letter in anger. She didn't write it in a rush, either. The words came slowly, steady as her breath when she forced herself to stay calm, sitting at the small wooden table in the dimly lit apartment while dawn crept across the Manhattan skyline. Her hand shook as she picked up the pen, but her resolve no longer did. She began with Nathan's name, just his name. Seeing it on the page sent a shiver through her, not of love or longing, but recognition. This was the man she married, and this was also the man she was leaving. The first sentences were simple, an acknowledgement that something had shattered and that she could no longer pretend they were whole. She didn't mention Sienna by name. She didn't need to. The betrayal she had seen near Rockefeller Center had carved itself into her memory deeply enough that no ink could capture it fully. But Claire wasn't writing to punish him. She was writing to free herself. Her pen moved across the page. "I saw you. I saw who you chose to be. And I realized I cannot save someone who does not want to be saved." She paused, hand resting on her stomach, feeling a faint movement beneath her palm. For the first time since the hospital, she felt a strange calm, not because things were better, but because she was finally doing something brave. She continued, describing the night she collapsed. The ambulance, the beeping monitors, how she whispered his name through tears while he ignored call after call. She didn't exaggerate. She didn't dramatize. She simply told the truth, a truth she had carried alone. Then came the line she almost couldn't bring herself to write. "I am not leaving to hurt you. I am leaving because staying is destroying me." She wiped her eyes, breathed deeply, and forced herself to keep going. She wrote about their first apartment in Brooklyn, the piano she stopped playing, the dreams she buried to make room for his. She confessed she had loved him with everything she had, but she could not raise a child in a home where she felt invisible. And then, gently, she wrote something she knew would cut him deeper than anger ever could. "I hope one day you become the man you pretend to be." When she finished, the letter filled 2 pages, her handwriting slightly uneven but steady. She folded it neatly, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it on the coffee table. Then she opened the Cartier box and looked at the earrings, the symbol of a love she once believed would last forever. She took one earring and tucked it into her bag. The other she laid beside the letter. A matched pair, now separated, just like them. Before leaving, Claire walked one last time through the apartment. Her fingertips grazed the edge of the kitchen counter, the back of the sofa, the closed nursery door. She wanted to feel something: nostalgia, heartbreak, second thoughts, but all she felt was a quiet ache, and underneath it, a rising strength. In the hallway, she paused, leaning lightly against the wall as a contraction of fear, not pain, tightened inside her. Leaving meant she was truly alone now. No safety net, no family, no money she controlled. But staying meant losing herself forever. She chose herself. She stepped into the elevator, clutching the bag that held her essentials and the single diamond earring. As the doors slid shut, she whispered, "We're free," directing the words toward the child inside her. Upstairs, in the empty apartment she'd left behind, the soft glow of the Christmas tree flickered across the table, illuminating the letter. A quiet farewell. A quiet reckoning. A quiet beginning of a life Nathan never expected her to claim. Nathan stood frozen in the middle of the living room, the goodbye letter trembling in his hand, the hospital wristband lying on the floor like a discarded truth he could no longer ignore. For a man who had built his entire life on control, controlling outcomes, controlling perception, controlling Claire, This moment hit him with a force he had never experienced. Claire was gone, and for the first time, the silence she left behind felt deafening. He reread the letter, each line slicing deeper. The clarity, the courage, the calmness of it. She hadn't screamed, she hadn't begged, she had simply walked away. That terrified him more than any confrontation ever could. Nathan grabbed his phone and dialed her number, straight to voicemail. He tried again, voicemail. He texted her. "Where are you? Claire, answer me. We need to talk." No response. He felt irritation rising, the same irritation he always used to hide guilt. But this time, irritation wasn't enough to drown out the creeping dread. Something had happened to her. Something serious. For the first time, he wondered if Claire had left because of him or because she physically couldn't stay. He scrolled through his recent calls. No missed calls, no messages. Then he remembered. Sienna had taken his phone that night. She had hidden notifications. She had silenced everything. A cold realization crawled up his spine. He might have ignored Claire's emergency. He slammed a fist against the counter. The sound echoed through the empty apartment like a warning shot. He called Sienna. She answered in her usual sultry tone. "Back home already? Miss me?" "Where is my phone?" he barked. "In my purse." "Why?" Nathan's chest tightened. "Did you see any messages from Claire? Any hospital alerts?" Sienna paused, then sighed dramatically. "Nathan, don't be dramatic. It's Christmas. Hospitals send alerts for anything these days." "Tell me what you saw," he growled. Her voice sharpened. "You're overreacting. This is exactly why I said she manipulates you emotionally." He hung up on her. He didn't even think he ran. Out the door, down the hall, into the elevator, out onto the sidewalk, where he flagged the first taxi he saw. New York Presbyterian Hospital, fast. During the ride, his mind spun. Claire had been so pale before Christmas. She had fainted once. He remembered brushing it off, telling her to eat better, sleep better, stop worrying so much. He remembered her trembling voice asking him to come home early one night. He had ignored it. He remembered her calling him 3 times during a dinner with Sienna. He had silenced the phone. The truth hit him with brutal clarity. He hadn't just failed her emotionally. He had failed her physically. When he arrived at the hospital, he dashed to the front desk. "My wife, Claire Donovan." She was admitted on Christmas Eve. The nurse typed calmly, unaware his world was disintegrating. Yes, she was seen. High blood pressure and stress-related complications. "Where is she now?" he asked, leaning forward. The nurse looked up. "She checked out the next morning." "Checked out? To go where?" "I'm sorry, sir. She didn't list a destination. She was discharged with someone." Someone else had taken care of Claire when he didn't. Nathan stumbled back from the counter, the room spinning. He imagined Claire in a hospital gown, crying, calling him, begging him to pick up, while he lay in a hotel bed with another woman. For the first time in years, Nathan felt something unfamiliar and unwelcome. Helplessness. As he walked out of the hospital into the freezing air, one truth echoed louder than the Christmas bells, ringing faintly in the distance. If Claire had survived this without him, she no longer needed him at all. And that terrified him. Because deep down, Nathan knew. He had finally pushed away the only person who ever loved him without conditions. Nathan had always believed he could outmaneuver any crisis professionally, socially, emotionally. He built an entire career on fixing problems before anyone else noticed them. But this time, the crisis was one he created, and it was already far beyond his control. The morning after discovering Claire had left, he barely slept. He paced the apartment like a man trapped inside his own life, replaying every mistake, every ignored call, every moment he chose Sienna over the woman who had once been his anchor. The apartment felt colder now. Even the Christmas lights flickered like they were judging him. He called Claire again. Voicemail. He called her doctor. "I'm sorry, Mr. Donovan, medical privacy." He called her old school. "She hasn't worked here in months. If we Toms, and what?" He even called Marcia, the neighbor he barely acknowledged before. She picked up, silence filling the line. "Nathan," she finally said, voice stiff. "Why are you calling me?" "I need to know if you've seen Claire," he replied, trying to keep his voice steady. "She left home." "The hospital." "I know where she is," Marcia cut in sharply, "and she doesn't want me telling you." He felt as though the floor dropped beneath him. She could be in danger. She needs me. No, Marcia snapped. She needed you months ago. She needed you last week. She needed you on Christmas Eve when she collapsed and begged you to answer the phone. She doesn't need you now. The line went dead. Nathan stood frozen, phone pressed to his ear long after the call ended. The truth was unavoidable now. Claire wasn't just hiding, she was protected. By people he had overlooked. By a community he never bothered to be part of. He had always seen Claire as someone fragile, dependent on him. He was wrong. She had built a life outside of him, quiet but real, and now she was leaning on that life instead of him. His panic deepened. Still, Nathan wasn't ready to give up control. He marched into the office, hair uncombed, shirt wrinkled, determined to drown himself in the one arena he still believed he could manage. Work. But even there, consequences awaited. His assistant, Jenna, avoided eye contact as he walked in. Colleagues whispered. Two partners paused their conversation the moment he passed. He felt the tension instantly. Finally, Jenna approached him. Mr. Steele wants to see you. Graham Steele, the CEO. A man with power, with influence, with the ability to erase or elevate careers. Nathan entered the corner office, trying to appear composed. Graham looked up from a report, his expression unreadable. Rough holiday? Graham asked. Nathan forced a laugh. Something like that. Graham tapped a few papers on his desk. I received. Concerning information, a PR source contacted the firm. Someone leaked photos of you and a woman at the Beverly Hills Hotel. Nathan's heart stopped. This is a misunderstanding. Is it? Graham asked quietly. Because the board is nervous. You're being considered for vice president next quarter. An affair, especially during your wife's high-risk pregnancy, reflects poorly on us. Nathan swallowed hard. Please just give me time to fix this. Graham leaned forward. Fix what, Nathan? The scandal? Or your marriage? For the first time, Nathan had no answer. Graham sighed. Take a leave of absence, effective immediately. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a slow, humiliating fall. Nathan left the office numb. Everything he'd built was slipping. His career, his image, his marriage. And as he stepped onto Park Avenue, with buses roaring past and holiday crowds brushing by, he felt something he hadn't felt since childhood. Small, insignificant, unwanted. And somewhere across the city, Claire, exhausted, healing, hidden away, was taking her first breath of peace without him. Her disappearance was no accident. It was her first act of freedom. The apartment Marcia brought Claire to wasn't glamorous. It wasn't polished or spacious or filled with curated decor like the one on the Upper East Side. It was a modest two-bedroom rental in Queens, with peeling paint on the window frames and a faint smell of old coffee and laundry detergent. But when Claire stepped inside, leaning on Marcia's arm for balance, she felt something she hadn't felt in months: safety. It was the first place that didn't carry Nathan's expectations, Nathan's judgment, Nathan's shadow. Marcia guided her to the couch. You sit, I'll get you something warm. Claire nodded weakly, exhaustion settling deep into her bones. The couch cushions sank beneath her weight, but instead of discomfort, she felt relief. The room hummed softly with the old radiator ticking, the distant sound of buses passing outside, and the muffled laughter of neighbors. Real life. Ordinary life. A life she once lived before ambition and deceit swallowed her marriage whole. Marcia returned with a mug of chamomile tea. You're safe here, sweetheart. Take all the time you need. That sentence alone almost made Claire cry. No one had told her she was safe in a long time. Over the next hours, Claire really slept for the first time since the hospital. When she woke, she found sunlight spilling across the wooden floors, illuminating dust particles dancing in the air. She heard Marcia humming in the kitchen. She felt her baby shift softly beneath her ribs. For the first time in months, she didn't feel alone. By afternoon, Claire forced herself to sit up and unpack the few belongings she'd brought. The ultrasound pictures, the rattle, the blanket, her Kindle. Each item felt like a piece of her own identity, a life she was rebuilding with bare hands and a trembling heart. But with the calm came the fear. What would she do now? How would she support herself? Where would she go after the baby arrived? What if Nathan found her? Just the thought made her skin prickle with anxiety. As if sensing the spiral, Marcia poked her head into the room. You up for some company? Claire nodded. Marcia stepped inside, carrying a small tray with soup and crackers. "Eat, then we talk." Claire obeyed. Halfway through, Marcia sat across from her, hands folded gently. "I know you're scared, anyone would be, but you're not alone, Claire. You have me, and soon, you'll have more help." Claire frowned. "What do you mean?" "Someone's been trying to contact you," Marcia said. "Not Nathan. Someone worth hearing from." I quote. Before Claire could respond, Marcia pulled a card from her pocket and set it on the table. A name she recognized instantly. Dr. Warren Blake. Her former student, her recent lifeline. The man whose voice she clung to while collapsing on her living room floor. "He came by yesterday looking for you," Marcia continued. "Wanted to make sure you were safe. He said he'll help however he can." Claire felt warmth spread across her chest. Not romantic, not yet, but grounding. Someone cared. Someone showed up. Someone chose her without obligation. Marcia squeezed her hand. "You're rebuilding, sweetheart. You don't need to know the whole path now. You just need to take the next step." That night, Claire sat by the window, wrapped in the knitted blanket, watching lights flicker across Queens. She pressed a hand to her belly. "We're okay," she whispered. "We're finally okay." For the first time, she believed it. She wasn't Claire Donovan, the forgotten wife. She wasn't the woman begging for attention. She was a mother, a survivor, a woman beginning again. Across the city, Nathan's world was falling apart. But here, in this small, imperfect apartment, Claire's world was finally beginning to heal. 2 days after settling into Marcia's apartment, Claire felt strong enough to take short walks within the building. She moved slowly down the hallway, hand on her stomach, feeling more like herself with each passing hour. Her body was healing, but her spirit, surprisingly, was healing faster. She wasn't whole yet, not even close, but she wasn't breaking anymore either. One afternoon, while resting on the couch with a cup of warm ginger tea, Marcia appeared in the doorway holding her phone. "Sweetheart," Marcia said, voice careful. "Dr. Blake is downstairs. He wants to talk to you. Only if you're ready." Claire froze. Her first instinct was fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being pitied, fear of facing someone who had seen her at her weakest. But then she reminded herself. Warren had been the only calm voice she heard when everything was falling apart. "Let him in," Claire whispered. A moment later, Warren stepped into the apartment. He wasn't wearing his white coat, just a simple navy sweater and jeans, but he carried the same steady warmth she remembered from the hospital. His eyes softened the moment they landed on her. "Claire," he said gently, "I've been worried." She attempted a smile. "I'm okay. Better than I was." He sat across from her, leaning forward. "The night you called, you scared me. You were in distress, alone, and I couldn't get information after the hospital discharged you. I needed to know you were safe." Claire looked down. "I didn't want to trouble you." "You weren't trouble," he said firmly. "You were someone who needed help. Worksy." The sincerity in his voice was almost disarming. Claire felt her throat tighten. For months, she had felt disposable, invisible, unimportant. Nathan's neglect had taught her to shrink herself. Yet, here was someone who made her feel seen without asking for anything in return. Warren cleared his throat and set a folder on the table. "I didn't come empty-handed. I wanted to show you something." Claire's brows furrowed as she opened the folder. Inside were documents, pamphlets, and a proposal draft from a city-funded educational program, one focused on integrating music therapy into public schools. "I'm leading the wellness division," Warren explained. "We've been trying to find someone with both musical training and classroom experience to help design the curriculum." Claire blinked. "You want me?" "I need you," he corrected softly. "Your experience is rare, your empathy is rare. And after what you've been through, I think you deserve something that allows you to rebuild, not just survive." Claire couldn't speak for a moment. The idea of having direction, a purpose, felt like a lifeline, something she feared she'd lost forever. But doubt crept in. What if Nathan? Warren shook his head. "This has nothing to do with him. This is your opportunity, your talent, your name. Thanks for watching." He hesitated, then added in a quieter voice, "Don't let the man who broke you decide what you're allowed to become." Marcia, who had been pretending not to eavesdrop near the kitchen, nodded approvingly behind him. Claire breathed out slowly. For the first time since leaving the Upper East Side, she felt something bloom in her chest. Possibility. "Let me think about it," she whispered. Take all the time you need, Warren replied. But know this, your life doesn't end with what happened. It begins after it. As he left, he paused at the door. And Claire, I'm proud of you, more than you know. After he was gone, Claire sat quietly, running her fingers along the edges of the proposal. Her baby kicked softly, as if agreeing with Warren's words. A door had opened. Not the past, not the version of herself built for Nathan. A new door, one she had the strength to walk through. And for the first time, Claire felt something close to hope. Nathan Donovan had always believed that consequences were for other people, men who weren't clever enough, wealthy enough, or strategic enough to stay ahead. But the week after Claire's disappearance, his illusion of invincibility began to crumble piece by piece, starting where it hurt him most, his career. He arrived at the office on Park Avenue with forced confidence, wearing his sharpest charcoal suit, hoping the power of presentation would mask the chaos underneath. But the moment he stepped through the glass doors, he sensed it. The shift. People whispering, glancing at him with an odd mix of curiosity and judgment. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't quiet, and Nathan hated not being in control of the narrative. In the elevator, two analysts stopped talking the second he entered. One of them held the New York Ledger, the city's biggest business gossip paper. Nathan didn't think much of it until he got a glimpse of the front page headline reflected in the metal panel. Scandal on Park Avenue. Executive seen vacationing with PR director while wife hospitalized. The photo beneath it made his stomach twist. There he was, on the hotel balcony in Beverly Hills, Sienna kissing his neck. Nathan nearly ripped the newspaper out of the analyst's hands. Instead, he straightened his jacket and walked out as if nothing fazed him, though his pulse roared in his ears. Inside his office, an email from HR waited for him. He hesitated, dreading its contents, but opened it anyway. Board to review, conduct immediate attendance required. A summons. A corporate red flag. His future crashing down with chilling efficiency. Before he could process it, his office phone rang. It was Graham Steele. Conference room. Now. Thanks, brace. Nathan swallowed hard and walked down the hall. When he entered, the room was dimly lit, blinds half drawn, Graham seated at the head of the table with a file in front of him. Sit, Graham said. Nathan obeyed. Graham opened the file. Photos, dates, hotel bills, screenshots of social media posts Sienna had uploaded, then deleted. It was all their evidence of an affair Nathan thought he'd kept hidden. This isn't just personal, Nathan, Graham said calmly. This affects the firm. Investors are calling. The board is questioning your judgment, and frankly, so am I. Nathan clenched his jaw. This is being blown out of proportion. Graham's eyes hardened. Your wife was hospitalized on Christmas Eve. Nathan froze. You know? I know because someone forwarded the emergency contact log to HR, Graham replied. An anonymous source. Nathan's blood ran cold. Sienna. Of course it was Sienna. Graham leaned back, disappointment etched into every line on his face. I'm putting you on indefinite leave, effective immediately. If the investigation worsens, the board may ask you to step down permanently. Nathan felt the walls closing in. Graham, I can fix this. Just give me time. You've already had time, Graham replied quietly. What you need now is accountability. Nathan stumbled out of the room, a mix of humiliation and rage boiling under his skin. He didn't go to his office. He didn't talk to anyone. He just walked out of the building, ignoring the Christmas lights, twinkling mockingly across Park Avenue. Outside, he dialed Sienna. She answered with a breezy, Hey, Nathan. What did you do? He spat. Her tone shifted instantly. Excuse me? You leaked the photos. You leaked everything. Sienna scoffed. Please, don't flatter yourself. Your downfall was inevitable. I just accelerated it. Nathan's grip tightened on the phone. I should have known you were using me. End quote. Of course I was, she said plainly. But don't worry, darling, you were using me too. We just wanted different prizes. She hung up. Nathan stared at his reflection in a store window, disheveled, shaken, stripped of the confidence he worshipped. His career was collapsing. His mistress had betrayed him. His wife was gone. And for the first time, Nathan realized he was alone. Truly, devastatingly alone. Claire's contractions began on a quiet Thursday evening, 2 weeks earlier than expected. She had been sitting on the old couch in Marcia's apartment, reading through the music therapy proposal Warren had given her. when a tight, tearing pain gripped her abdomen. At first, she tried to breathe through it. False alarm, she told herself. Stress. Exhaustion. But when the second wave hit stronger, sharper, making her grip the armrest until her knuckles whitened, she knew this wasn't a drill. "Marcia!" she cried out, voice trembling. Within seconds, Marcia hurried into the room, eyes widening as she took in Claire's posture, her labored breathing, the fear etched across her face. "It's time," Marcia said, already reaching for her coat and the hospital bag they'd prepared just in case. "Honey, it's really time." Claire's heart pounded as Marcia guided her toward the door. She grabbed her bag with the essentials, the baby blanket, the rattle, and the single diamond earring she kept, not as a memory of Nathan, but as a reminder of the moment she chose herself. They moved slowly down the stairs, each step sending another spike of pain radiating through her lower back. By the time they reached the street, Claire could barely stand. A taxi screeched to a stop in front of them, and Marcia helped her inside, shouting the hospital address with urgency. At the hospital, everything blurred. Nurses rushed her into a delivery room. Machines beeped steadily, tracking the baby's heartbeat. Bright lights flooded her vision. Voices overlapped, urgent but calm. Claire clung to the railings, breath shallow, sweat dripping down her temples as another contraction ripped through her. "Where is Warren?" she whispered between gasps. Marcia squeezed her hand. "He's on his way, sweetheart. Just focus on breathing." A quote. Minutes felt like hours as Claire fought to stay conscious. Her blood pressure spiked dangerously. A nurse murmured something about fetal distress. Claire's chest tightened with panic, not for herself, but for the tiny life fighting inside her. "Please," she whispered, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Please be okay." As if summoned by her fear, Warren burst into the room, still in scrubs from a long shift. His hair was tousled, his face tense with concern. But the moment he reached her side, Claire felt a steadiness she'd been craving for months. "I'm here," he said gently, taking her trembling hand. "You're not alone. We're going to get you through this." For the first time in a long time, she believed someone. The delivery was complicated. Claire's body was exhausted, her pulse raced, the baby's heartbeat dipped. Doctors discussed options in low voices. Words like emergency intervention and stabilize her vitals floating above her. But Warren stayed anchored beside her, voice grounding her through every contraction. "You're stronger than you think," he whispered. "Just keep breathing. You're almost there." And finally, after one last desperate push, a piercing newborn cry filled the room. A boy. Alive. Safe. Claire collapsed back onto the pillows, sobbing with relief as the nurse placed the small, warm bundle against her chest. His cries softened the moment he felt her skin. Her fingers traced his tiny cheek, his miniature hands, his soft breaths. He was real. He was hers. He was everything she had fought for. Marcia cried quietly in the corner. Warren exhaled deeply, stepping back to give her space, but unable to hide the profound relief in his eyes. "Claire," he said softly, "you did it." But in that same moment, miles away in a cold apartment filled with regret, Nathan stared at a missed call notification from the hospital. He had missed the birth. He had missed everything. And when he finally learned where Claire had gone and who had been with her, his world would shatter even further. The days following the birth were a blur of exhaustion, soft lullabies, and a strange, swelling peace that wrapped itself around Claire like a blanket warmer than any she'd brought. Her son, tiny, perfect, with faint wisps of caramel-colored hair, slept curled against her chest, his steady breaths reminding her that the world had not ended. It had only shifted. Marcia visited every day, bringing warm meals and gentle reminders that she wasn't alone. Nurses stopped by just to admire the baby's quiet alertness. Even strangers in the hallway offered smiling congratulations. For the first time in nearly a year, Claire felt surrounded not by pressure or judgment, but by human warmth. But the person who surprised her most was Warren. He showed up every morning, coffee in one hand and a soft expression on his face, never intrusive, never assuming, only present. He checked her vitals, explained her recovery step by step, and made sure the baby was thriving. And when Claire thanked him, he always responded the same way. "You did the hard part. I'm just here to support you." Support, a word she wasn't used to hearing sincerely. One afternoon, after Marcia stepped out to take a call, Claire sat in the hospital bed, rocking her newborn as Warren entered with a clipboard. He paused when he saw her humming softly to the baby, her voice tender but steady. She looked different, still tired, still healing, but there was a glow in her eyes he hadn't seen before. "You look stronger today," Warren said. Claire smiled faintly. "I feel new. Like someone pressed reset on my life." Warren hesitated before sitting down. "That's because you finally have space to breathe, and because you chose yourself. That's not easy." Claire looked down at her son. "I hope he grows up knowing that choosing yourself isn't selfish." "He will," Warren assured her, "because you'll teach him." They shared a quiet moment, the kind that didn't need filling with words. Claire studied Warren, the gentle concern in his eyes, the sincerity in his posture. There was no pressure, no expectation, only presence. "Warren," she said softly, "thank you for everything, for showing up when no one else did." His expression shifted, a flicker of something deeper crossing his face. "You don't owe me anything, Claire. I'm here because I want to be. Because you matter." Her breath caught, not in the way it did with Nathan, tight, anxious, uncertain. This was different. Warm. Steady. Safe. But she wasn't ready for anything new yet. Not love. Not labels. Not another man to define her life. And Warren seemed to understand that, without her having to say a word. He simply reached out and gently squeezed her hand. "When you're ready," he murmured, "your life will open up, and you'll walk through it with strength you don't even realize you have." As days passed, Claire gradually regained her energy. She practiced sitting up without assistance, learned to swaddle her newborn with graceful precision, and even began reading through the music therapy proposal again. Her old spark, buried deep under months of emotional fatigue, was returning. One morning, as she sat by the window feeding her son, sunlight spilling across her lap, she realized she didn't feel broken anymore. Yes, she was hurt. Yes, she was healing. But the pieces inside her were rearranging into someone stronger than before. Someone who could build a new life. Someone who could build a new future. Someone who could finally see her own worth. And across the city, Nathan, sleep-deprived, spiraling, ignored by the board, and cut off by Sienna, felt the opposite. He was unraveling. She was rising. And for the first time since their marriage began, their paths were no longer parallel. They were heading in completely different directions. And Claire was heading toward the light. By the time Claire was discharged from the hospital, her world had shifted again, not violently, not painfully, but with the gentle force of a woman stepping into the beginning of her new life. She moved back into Marcia's apartment with her newborn, a tiny bundle swaddled in the soft blanket she brought from home. The room that once felt like a refuge now felt like a hopeful starting point. Every morning, the baby stirred softly, his breaths warm against her chest, reminding her that healing wasn't just possible, it was happening. But outside the safety of that small queen's apartment, a storm was brewing. The city's largest philanthropic gala, a glittering, high-profile event that hosted CEOs, investors, and media figures, was approaching. It was an event Nathan had attended every year, flaunting his success in tailored suits and polished shoes. This year, however, he had no invitation. His leave of absence had quietly been rebranded as pending disciplinary review. Several sponsors had requested he not attend. His downfall, once unthinkable, was becoming unavoidable. But he wasn't the only one connected to the gala. Graham Steele, the CEO who once mentored Nathan, was co-hosting the event, and he had reached out to Warren for support in a new initiative, a citywide wellness and arts integration program. Warren, in turn, had insisted that Claire's voice would be essential at the presentation. At first, Claire resisted. "I can't stand in front of a crowd right now," she whispered, rocking her newborn. "And what if Nathan shows up?" Warren shook his head. "He won't be on the guest list. Even if he tries, security won't let him near the stage." Then, softening, he added, "Claire, this isn't about him. It's about your work. Your future. You deserve to be seen for what you can create, not what you survived." She didn't answer right away. The thought of speaking publicly terrified her. She had spent so long shrinking herself to fit inside the shadow of a marriage that never valued her. But Warren's belief in her steady, warm, never demanding left a mark she couldn't ignore. 3 days later, she said yes. The night of the gala arrived crisp and electric. Manhattan, glowing with winter lights, and countless dignitaries stepping out of black cars in glamorous gowns and suits. Inside the ballroom at the River Cafe, crystal chandeliers reflected across polished floors while a string quartet played softly. Claire entered quietly through a back entrance, wearing a simple white dress that fit her postpartum body gently. She wasn't there to impress anyone. She was there to reclaim her voice. Warren met her backstage, his expression brightening the moment he saw her. "You look confident." She shook her head nervously. "I look terrified." He laughed softly. "Terrified people don't show up." "You did." As Graham Steele stepped on stage to introduce the new initiative, Claire felt her heart pound. She held her speech carefully, pages she'd rewritten a dozen times, not to make it perfect, but to make it honest. Meanwhile, across Brooklyn, Nathan was not in a tuxedo. He wasn't in a limousine. He was sitting alone in his apartment, the place that once symbolized his status, now littered with takeout boxes and unpaid bills. His phone buzzed with a gossip alert. "CEO announces new education initiative at River Cafe Gala tonight." A photo attached to the article made Nathan squint. Warren Blake smiling. And beside him, just barely visible, Claire. The air left his lungs? "No," he whispered, shaking his head as if denial could reverse it. She wouldn't. Enforce. But she would. She already had. Back at the gala, Claire stepped onto the stage when Graham called her name. The lights were bright. The room fell into a respectful hush. Her hands trembled, but her voice, when she finally spoke, did not. She talked about music, about children, about healing, about rebuilding a life from the rubble of a broken marriage without naming Nathan, but revealing everything that mattered. People leaned in. People listened. People saw her. And as her final words echoed through the room, she realized something powerful. She wasn't living in Nathan's story anymore. This one was hers. The applause still echoed when Claire stepped off the stage, her breath unsteady but her heart filled with something she hadn't felt in years: validation. Real validation. The kind that wasn't handed out as pity or obligation, but earned through her own voice. Graham shook her hand proudly. Warren looked at her with a quiet admiration she wasn't ready to name, and several guests congratulated her with warm sincerity. But across the ballroom, an unexpected ripple moved through the crowd: murmurs, shifting chairs, a flicker of unease. Claire didn't notice at first. She was too focused on steadying her breathing, too busy absorbing the relief of having survived the most daunting moment of her new life. Then Marcia hurried backstage, eyes wide. "Don't panic, sweetheart," she whispered. "But he's here." Claire's stomach dropped. "Nathan?" Marcia nodded grimly. Security stopped him at the door. He tried to force his way in. "Graham's people are on it, but he's creating a scene." Claire's breath hitched, but she didn't cry, didn't tremble. She simply felt a cold, heavy certainty settle in her chest. Nathan hadn't come for her. He had come for control. Meanwhile, outside the ballroom, Nathan stood, surrounded by security guards, his suit wrinkled, his expression wild with frustration. Cameras flashed nearby society, reporters drawn to chaos the way moths chase fire. His hair was uncombed, his tie crooked, and his voice loud enough to echo down the hall. "I need to speak to my wife," he shouted. "You don't understand. She's being manipulated. She's unstable. Graham Steele approached then, calm as stone. "Nathan, stop. If you want." Nathan turned sharply. You let her speak tonight? You put her on stage to humiliate me?" Graham didn't flinch. "The only person humiliating you right now is yourself." Reporters leaned in, sensing blood in the water. Nathan's voice cracked with anger. "She's my wife. She owes me." Graham cut him off sharply. "Claire owes you nothing, not after what you did." A hush fell. Cameras clicked. Graham continued, voice steady but firm. "She came here tonight because she has a gift. Because she's rebuilding her life. And because she's stronger than anything you tried to break." Nathan's face flushed an ugly shade of red. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know exactly what I'm talking about," Graham replied. "I know you ignored her when she was hospitalized. I know you were in Beverly Hills with another woman when she needed you most. And I know you leaked lies about her to protect your image." Nathan froze because the last accusation wasn't true. But everyone believed it instantly. Even Sienna, who had actually leaked the story, wasn't there to defend him. She was already aligning herself with a different executive, leaving Nathan stranded. "Security," Graham said, nodding. "Escort Mr. Donovan off the property." Nathan lunged forward, desperate. Claire, Claire, please, I just need to talk to her. Claire. His voice cracked, not with love, but with panic. The panic of a man who had lost control, lost power, lost the woman who once shielded him from his worst impulses. Inside, Claire could hear the commotion. Warren stepped beside her, protective tension radiating off him. You don't have to see him, he murmured. I know, she whispered, but she wasn't afraid anymore. Not of Nathan, not of the past, not of the man she once loved. She stepped forward just enough to look down the hallway. Nathan saw her and everything in him collapsed. Claire, please, I'm begging you. I'll change. I'll do anything. Just don't throw this away. Her face remained calm, heartbreak replaced by clarity. I didn't throw anything away, she said softly. You did. His expression crumpled, desperation twisting into despair. But Claire didn't look away. Not this time. Goodbye, Nathan. Security led him out, cameras flashing, reporters murmuring, the world watching his fall unfold in real time. And as the doors closed behind him, Claire felt an extraordinary lightness, like the final chain had snapped free. Snow fell lightly over the city the morning after the gala, a soft, cleansing snowfall that made Manhattan look almost gentle. Claire sat near the window of Marcia's apartment, her newborn asleep in her arms, breathing slow and steady. The chaos of the previous night felt distant now, like a storm she had finally walked out of. She'd stood tall, spoken her truth, and faced the man who once held her heart in his careless hands, and she had survived. But survival was no longer the goal. This was the beginning of something better. A knock at the door interrupted her quiet moment. Marcia opened it before Claire could stand. Warren stepped inside, carrying a small wrapped package. He looked hesitant, as if unsure whether he was intruding. I didn't want to come uninvited, he said softly, but I had something for you. Something I thought you should have today. Claire smiled gently. You're always welcome here. He relaxed, just a little, and walked toward her. The morning light caught his features, tired but kind, worn but steady, the kind of steady Claire had never known until now. This is for you, he said, handing her the package. Claire unfolded the wrapping, expecting something practical, a baby blanket, a book, something medical. But inside the box lay something far more symbolic. A pair of diamond earrings. Not ostentatious, not extravagant. Elegant, delicate, balanced. She stilled. Her heart caught in her throat. I can't take these, she whispered. Warren shook his head. They're not a gift in the romantic sense. Graham had them. He told me to give them to you. He paused, letting the meaning settle. They belong to your mother. She once helped him during a difficult time in his youth. He promised himself he'd repay her kindness someday. This was his way of keeping that promise. A warm ache spread through Claire's chest. She touched the earrings gently, feeling the weight of memory and destiny woven into them. My mother, she breathed. Warren nodded. He knew giving them to you now would mean something. Claire blinked back the sting of tears, not the sorrowful kind, but tears that signaled a heart stitching itself back together. She turned the earrings in her hand. They weren't like the cold, gleaming pair Nathan once used to make her feel less ordinary. These felt like restoration, like a circle closing, like a future opening. Thank you, she whispered. Warren smiled softly. There's more? He handed her a folder, updated documents for the music therapy program. Her new title, Creative Director of Early Childhood Sound and Wellness. A paid position. Flexible hours, full benefits. Claire, he said gently, you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from strength. She exhaled shakily. I never thought I'd have a life outside of Nathan. You don't need him to have a life, Warren replied. You built this one yourself. Their eyes met steady, honest, unhurried. There was no rush, no expectation, just the warm understanding of two people whose paths had intertwined in the ruins of one life and the birth of another. Marcia, pretending not to eavesdrop, sniffed loudly in approval. Later that afternoon, Claire stepped outside with her baby, bundled gently against her chest. The snow had stopped, leaving the world bright and glistening. She walked toward the small park down the street, her breath clouding the air in soft spirals. She felt lighter, freer, whole. Somewhere across the river, Nathan was confronting the emptiness he'd created. His career stalled, his reputation shattered, his home silent. He would face accountability, slowly and painfully. Not because Claire wanted revenge, but because life has a way of honoring the truth. And Claire? She finally walked toward a world that welcomed her. A world where love could grow slowly, safely, maybe even with a man like Warren someday. A world where her son would know strength not as sacrifice, but as self-worth. A world where she wasn't invisible. She breathed in the cold winter air, closed her eyes, and whispered, "We're home." Snow fell lightly over the city, the morning after the gala, a soft, cleansing snowfall that made Manhattan look almost gentle. Claire sat near the window of Marcia's apartment, her newborn asleep in her arms, breathing slow and steady. The chaos of the previous night felt distant now, like a storm she had finally walked out of. She'd stood tall, spoken her truth, and faced the man who once held her heart in his careless hands. And she had survived. But survival was no longer the goal. This was the beginning of something better. A knock at the door interrupted her quiet moment. Marcia opened it before Claire could stand. Warren stepped inside, carrying a small wrapped package. He looked hesitant, as if unsure whether he was intruding. "I didn't want to come uninvited," he said softly, "but I had something for you, something I thought you should have today." Claire smiled gently. "You're always welcome here." He relaxed, just a little, and walked toward her. The morning light caught his features, tired but kind, worn but steady. The kind of steady Claire had never known until now. "This is for you," he said, handing her the package. Claire unfolded the wrapping, expecting something practical, a baby blanket, a book, something medical. But inside the box lay something far more symbolic. A pair of diamond earrings. Not ostentatious, not extravagant. Elegant, delicate, balanced. She stilled. Her heart caught in her throat. "I can't take these," she whispered. Warren shook his head. "They're not a gift in the romantic sense. Graham had them. He told me to give them to you." He paused, letting the meaning settle. "They belong to your mother. She once helped him during a difficult time in his youth. He promised himself he'd repay her kindness someday. This was his way of keeping that promise." A warm ache spread through Claire's chest. She touched the earrings gently, feeling the weight of memory and destiny woven into them. "My mother," she breathed. Warren nodded. He knew giving them to you now would mean something. Claire blinked back the sting of tears, not the sorrowful kind, but tears that signaled a heart stitching itself back together. She turned the earrings in her hand. They weren't like the cold, gleaming pair Nathan once used to make her feel less ordinary. These felt like restoration, like a circle closing, like a future opening. "Thank you," she whispered. Warren smiled softly. "There's more." He handed her a folder, updated documents for the music therapy program. Her new title, Creative Director of Early Childhood Sound and Wellness. A paid position, flexible hours, full benefits. "Claire," he said gently, "you're not starting from nothing. You're starting from strength." She exhaled shakily. "I never thought I'd have a life outside of Nathan." And reform it. "You don't need him to have a life," Warren replied. "You built this one yourself." Their eyes met steady, honest, unhurried. There was no rush, no expectation. Just the warm understanding of two people whose paths had intertwined in the ruins of one life and the birth of another. Marcia, pretending not to eavesdrop, sniffed loudly in approval. Later that afternoon, Claire stepped outside with her baby, bundled gently against her chest. The snow had stopped, leaving the world bright and glistening. She walked toward the small park down the street, her breath clouding the air in soft spirals. She felt lighter, freer, whole. Somewhere across the river, Nathan was confronting the emptiness he'd created. His career stalled, his reputation shattered, his home silent. He would face accountability, slowly and painfully. Not because Claire wanted revenge, but because life has a way of honoring the truth. And Claire? She finally walked toward a world that welcomed her. A world where love could grow slowly, safely, maybe even with a man like Warren someday. A world where her son would know strength not as sacrifice, but as self-worth. A world where she wasn't invisible. She breathed in the cold winter air, closed her eyes, and whispered, "We're home." All right, my friend. So the story has come to an end. And if you're still here, right now, reading this moment with me, then something in Claire's journey must have touched you, maybe gently, maybe painfully, maybe like a quiet reminder of your own strength. Let's talk. Just you and me. Claire's story teaches us that healing is not loud. It's not perfect. It's the decision to walk away from what breaks you even when your whole world is shaking. It's choosing peace over chaos, truth over comfort, and dignity over fear. The Stoics said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius could have been speaking directly to Claire, or to any of us trying to rebuild after heartbreak. Sometimes life won't give us closure, but it will give us clarity. Sometimes we don't get the apologies we deserved, but we do get the future we deserved far more. If this story made your heart ache, or made you pause, or made you whisper, "I needed this," then I hope you carry one simple truth with you. You are allowed to choose yourself. And choosing yourself is never a failure. It's the beginning of becoming whole again. If you felt something today, please like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Not for the algorithm, but so more people who need these stories can find them, just like you did. Thank you for staying until the very end. You matter here.